June 13th, 1886, Lake Starnberg, Bavaria. Early evening. King Ludwig II of Bavaria and his physician, Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, walk along the shore of the lake. They are alone. No guards accompany them. The doctor insisted on privacy. At 6:30 p.m., they leave the grounds of Castle Berg. By 11:30 p.m., both are dead, floating face down in shallow water. The official verdict: Ludwig drowned himself. The doctor died trying to stop him. The unofficial truth: no one knows. Ludwig had been declared insane 3 days earlier, deposed by his own ministers. A medical report, compiled without examining him, declared him unfit to rule. His uncle Luitpold was named regent. Ludwig never saw the men who judged him. The diagnosis was based on gossip, complaints from servants, accounts of bizarre behavior collected by a disillusioned courtier. The real reason? Debt. By 1885, Ludwig owed 14 million marks. His ministers wanted him gone. The madness was convenient. To understand how this happened, you must see what came before: the man himself, the childhood that shaped him, the dreams that consumed him, the castle that bankrupted a kingdom, Neuschwanstein, a fantasy built on borrowed money, a monument to obsession. Ludwig spent only 172 days there. He died before it was finished. The castle killed him, financially and literally, but it also saved Bavaria. Today, 1.4 million visitors annually generate $67 million, the Mad King's revenge. Ludwig II was born August 25, 1845, at Nymphenburg Palace, Munich, the eldest son of Crown Prince Maximilian and Princess Marie of Prussia. His childhood was not happy. His father was distant, rigid, obsessed with duty. His mother was cold, unaffectionate. Ludwig and his younger brother Otto were raised under strict discipline. Tutors were harsh. Play was limited. Affection was scarce. The boys grew up isolated, surrounded by adults who treated them as future kings, not children. Ludwig's refuge was Hohenschwangau Castle, the family's summer residence in the Bavarian Alps. His father, Maximilian II, had purchased the ruins of an old fortress in 1832 and rebuilt it as a neo-Gothic retreat. The castle was decorated with murals depicting medieval legends: Lohengrin, the Swan Knight, Parsifal, the Grail Seeker, Tannhäuser. Ludwig grew up surrounded by these images. They shaped his imagination. They defined his vision of kingship: not politics, not governance, but romance, myth, the idealized past. From the windows of Hohenschwangau, Ludwig could see the ruins of two medieval castles across the valley, Vorder Hohenschwangau and Hinter Hohenschwangau. They sat on a rocky outcrop above the Pölat Gorge, surrounded by mountains. As a child, Ludwig explored the ruins. He imagined knights, tournaments, a court where art and beauty ruled. He told his brother Otto he would one day rebuild the castles, not as ruins, but as a true medieval palace, a place where he could live as he imagined kings once lived, noble, isolated, free from the modern world. In 1861, at age 15, Ludwig attended a performance of Richard Wagner's opera Lohengrin in Munich. The experience transformed him. The music, the story of the Swan Knight, the themes of isolation and divine mission resonated deeply. Wagner's operas became Ludwig's obsession. He saw himself in the heroes: Lohengrin, Parsifal, Tannhäuser, misunderstood alone, destined for something greater. Opera was not entertainment. It was a blueprint for life. Ludwig decided he would be Wagner's patron. He would build the worlds Wagner imagined. He would make myth real. On March 10, 1864, Ludwig's father, Maximilian II, died suddenly. Ludwig was 18. He became King Ludwig II of Bavaria unprepared and unwilling. He hated politics. He hated ceremonies. He hated dealing with ministers, diplomats, public appearances. He was painfully shy, introverted, awkward in social settings. He preferred solitude. His advisors expected him to marry, produce heirs, lead Bavaria. He did none of these things. He attended to paperwork dutifully, but avoided people. His kingdom was a burden. His true life existed elsewhere in his imagination. Within months of becoming king, Ludwig summoned Richard Wagner to Munich. He offered the composer unlimited financial support, a house, a salary, funding for operas. Wagner accepted eagerly. For 3 years, Ludwig poured royal funds into Wagner's projects. The relationship scandalized Munich. Wagner was arrogant, extravagant, politically tone-deaf. He spent Ludwig's money recklessly. The public resented it. The ministers protested. In 1865, Ludwig was forced to send Wagner away. The composer moved to Switzerland. The friendship endured, but the financial support became more discreet. Ludwig learned a lesson. His dreams required privacy. He would build where no one could stop him. In 1866, Bavaria sided with Austria in the Austro-Prussian War. Prussia won decisively. Bavaria was humiliated, forced into a defensive alliance with Prussia. Ludwig hated the loss of sovereignty. He hated modern politics, the intrusion of Prussia, the industrialization of Europe. He retreated further into his private world. If he could not control his kingdom's politics, he would control his personal environment. He would build castles, refuges from reality, places where medieval ideals could be recreated in stone and mortar. The first project, Neuschwanstein. In 1868, Ludwig ordered the ruins of Vorderhohenschwangau and Hinterhohenschwangau demolished. The site would be cleared for a new palace. Not a restoration, but a creation. A Romanesque castle inspired by Wagner's operas, by medieval legends, by Ludwig's vision of kingship. He commissioned Christian Jank, a theatrical set designer, to draft the initial designs. Jank was not an architect. He was a scenic painter who had worked on Wagner's operas. His drawings were fantastical, theatrical, impossible, exactly what Ludwig wanted. Architect Eduard Riedel was brought in to translate Jank's sketches into buildable plans. Work on the site began in summer 1868. Up to 8 meters of rock outcrop were removed to make way for foundations. Explosives, pickaxes, shovels. The site was remote, accessible only by a narrow mountain path. A new road was constructed to transport materials. By June 1869, the road was complete. On September 5, 1869, the foundation stone was laid. A ceremony Ludwig did not attend. He was at Berg Castle on Lake Starnberg, avoiding the public. The stone was embedded with the building plan, portraits of Ludwig, and coins from his reign. A capsule of ambition sealed into the rock. The design was eclectic, Romanesque mixed with Gothic and Byzantine elements. The elongated building would contain numerous towers, ornamental turrets, gables, balconies, pinnacles, sculptures. Window openings were fashioned as bi- and triforia in Romanesque style. The structure would use 465 tons of Salzburg marble, 1,250 tons of sandstone, 400,000 bricks, and 2,050 cubic meters of wood for scaffolding. The construction was modern, brick walls with limestone cladding, cemented foundations, load-bearing iron beams for structural support. Medieval appearance, 19th century engineering. Ludwig expected the project to be completed in 3 years. The estimate was delusional. The site was difficult. Materials had to be hauled up mountain roads. Labor was expensive. The designs kept changing. Ludwig constantly demanded additions, alterations, more elaborate details. He wanted a throne hall, a singer's hall modelled on Wartburg Castle, a grotto, hidden staircases. The project spiraled. The initial cost estimate was 3.2 million marks. By the time construction slowed in 1886, the total cost had reached 6.2 million marks, nearly double the estimate. Ludwig paid from his personal fortune, not state funds. But his personal fortune had limits. The Gateway building was completed first. It had its topping out ceremony on June 11, 1872, and was ready for occupation by the end of 1873. Ludwig used the upper floor as provisional accommodation when he visited the site. For years, he lived in the gatehouse while the main palace was under construction. He watched from the windows as workmen hauled stone, mixed mortar, erected scaffolding. The castle was his obsession. He visited often, checked progress, demanded changes. He slept in the incomplete gatehouse, surrounded by the sounds of construction. The dream was more real to him than his actual kingship. Building of the palace, the main residential structure, commenced in September 1872. The scale required the latest technology. The throne hall, added by Ludwig's request, needed to be an encased steel construction. A two-story hall, Byzantine-inspired, with an apse designed to hold a throne dais surrounded by arcades. The hall was modelled on the Allerheiligen Church in Munich residence. It mixed images of the Grail Hall from Wagner's Parsifal with royal symbols of divine right. The throne was never installed. Ludwig died before it arrived. The hall remains thronelessly symbolic, an empty space where Ludwig's vision of kingship was meant to reside. The topping out ceremony for the palace was held on January 29, 1880. The structure was complete, but the interior decoration and technical fittings were far from finished. The work continued for another 4.5 years. By mid-1884, the interior was mostly complete, though without all the final details Ludwig had envisioned. He moved into the unfinished palace in 1884. He spent only 172 days there over the next 2 years. He never saw it completed. The Bower and the Square Tower, simplified versions of the originally planned buildings, were not finished until 1892, 6 years after his death. The Singers' Hall was one of Ludwig's favorite projects. Inspired by the Hall of Minstrels at Wartburg Castle, it was decorated with scenes from Wagner's operas, Lohengrin, Parsifal, Tannhäuser. The room had a stage, but it was never meant for performances. It was a space to evoke courtly love and chivalry, a physical manifestation of the ideals Ludwig cherished. The hall was enormous, lavishly painted, acoustically perfect. No audience ever filled it. Ludwig sat alone, imagining the knights and troubadours who existed only in his mind. Ludwig financed Neuschwanstein, along with 2 other castles, Linderhof and Herrenchiemsee, from his personal income. The Bavarian state did not pay. Ludwig had a generous civil list, about 4.23 million marks annually from the state, plus income from inherited royal property, about 500,000 marks annually, and secret payments from Otto von Bismarck, 300,000 marks per year. This gave Ludwig roughly 1 million marks per year for his building projects and personal indulgences. It was not enough. By 1877, the funds no longer covered his commissions. Debt accumulated. Creditors threatened lawsuits. In 1884, creditors were on the verge of legal action. Finance Minister Emil von Riedel arranged a bank loan of 7.5 million marks to avert disaster. The loan was guaranteed by the royal family. Bismarck provided an additional special payment of 1 million marks. The debts were temporarily paid off, but Ludwig did not stop. He could not. The castles were his life. He continued commissioning construction, ordering materials, demanding alterations. by the summer of 1885, he had amassed new debts of almost 6.5 million marks. The royal cabinet treasury was insolvent. Ludwig's ministers advised him to economize. He refused. Instead, he planned further opulent designs. He demanded that loans be sought from all of Europe's royalty. He wrote to the Ottoman Sultan, the Tsar of Russia, King Leopold II of Belgium, requesting financial assistance. The letters were desperate, bizarre. He remained aloof from state matters. He stopped receiving ministers or secretaries. He avoided the public. He spent his nights alone, riding through the mountains, visiting his castles, sleeping during the day. His ministers were alarmed. The king was becoming unmanageable. The debt was becoming a state crisis. Feeling harassed and irritated, Ludwig considered dismissing the entire cabinet and replacing them with fresh faces. The cabinet decided to act first. They sought a constitutional means to depose him. The rationale? He was mentally ill and unable to rule. They asked Ludwig's uncle, Prince Luitpold, to step into the royal vacancy once Ludwig was removed. Luitpold agreed on condition that the conspirators produced reliable proof that the king was helplessly insane. Between January and March 1886, they assembled the Ärztliches Gutachten, medical report, on Ludwig's fitness to rule. Most of the details in the report were compiled by Count Maximilian von Hohenstein, who was disillusioned with Ludwig and actively sought his downfall. Hohenstein used bribery and his high rank to extract complaints, accounts, and gossip from the king's servants. The litany of supposed bizarre behavior included pathological shyness, avoidance of state business, complex and expensive flights of fancy, dining outdoors in cold weather, wearing heavy overcoats in summer, sloppy and childish table manners, dispatching servants on lengthy and expensive voyages to research architectural details in foreign lands, and violent threats of abuse to servants. None of it proved insanity. All of it proved eccentricity. The distinction did not matter to the conspirators. On June 10, 1886, 4 psychiatrists signed the medical report without ever examining Ludwig. The diagnosis? Paranoia. The conclusion? Ludwig was unfit to rule. The report was presented to the Bavarian government. Luitpold was declared regent. On June 12th, a commission traveled to Neuschwanstein to inform Ludwig of his deposition and take him into custody. Ludwig refused to go. He attempted to rally local support, ordering the arrest of the commissioners. Confusion reigned. Eventually, Ludwig was persuaded to accompany the commissioners to Castle Berg on Lake Starnberg, where he would be held under medical supervision. The next day, June 13th, Ludwig and Dr. von Gudden walked along the lakeshore. What happened remains a mystery. Both men drowned in shallow water. Ludwig's coat was found floating. Von Gudden had scratches on his face. The official verdict? Ludwig drowned himself. The doctor died trying to stop him. The unofficial theories? Ludwig was murdered. He was escaping. The doctor tried to sedate him and drowned in the struggle. No one knows. The king was dead. The debt remained. The castle stood unfinished, a monument to ambition, isolation, and financial ruin. The castle was supposed to be finished in 3 years. The estimate was delusional from the start. The site was difficult, perched on a rocky outcrop 200 meters above the Perlat Gorge. Materials had to be hauled up newly constructed mountain roads. Workers needed housing, food, supervision. The designs kept changing. Ludwig visited constantly, demanded additions, insisted on alterations. 3 years became 5, then 10, then 17. By 1886, when Ludwig died, the castle was still unfinished. The bower and square tower were incomplete. The throne never arrived for the throne hall. The kitchen was partially equipped. The project had consumed 6.2 million marks, double the original estimate. It consumed Ludwig as well. Daily life at Neuschwanstein during the brief periods Ludwig resided there was surreal. He moved into the unfinished palace in 1884, living among scaffolding, unpainted walls, incomplete furnishings. He spent only 172 days there over 2 years. He rarely invited guests. He avoided state business. He slept during the day, woke at night, conducted his affairs in darkness. Servants reported he dined alone, elaborate meals served through hidden pulley systems or delivered via secret passages. He avoided eye contact. He spoke in whispers or not at all. He read by candlelight in rooms lined with mirrors, the reflections multiplying his solitude into an infinity of loneliness. The interior decoration was obsessive, theatrical, fantastical. Every room referenced Wagner's operas. The throne hall was modeled on the Grail temple from Parsifal, Byzantine mosaics, golden arches, religious imagery. The hall was 2 stories tall, supported by concealed steel beams, an engineering marvel disguised as medieval craftsmanship. The throne was supposed to sit on a raised dais, surrounded by arcades, beneath a chandelier shaped like a Byzantine crown. The throne never arrived. Ludwig died before it was installed. The hall remains empty, a stage set for a king who never took his place. The Singers' Hall was Ludwig's homage to Wagner's Tannhäuser. The room recreated the legendary song contest at Wartburg Castle. Wall paintings depicted troubadours, knights, courtly love. The hall was acoustically perfect, designed for musical performances. Ludwig never hosted a performance. He sat alone in the hall, imagining the songs, the applause, the court that existed only in his mind. The room was a monument to isolation, disguised as a celebration of community. The architecture was functional, the purpose was fantasy. The king's bedroom took 4.5 years to complete. Carved oak panels, gilded details, a bed so elaborate it required 4 years just to carve the woodwork. The bed was covered in gold-threaded embroidery depicting scenes from Wagner's operas. Ludwig slept there rarely. He preferred to sleep during the day, waking at sunset, conducting business at night. He avoided Munich. He avoided his ministers. He avoided reality. The bedroom was a shrine to medieval kingship, inhabited by a man who could not function in the modern world. Ludwig's nocturnal habits became legendary. He emerged from his castles after dark, riding through the mountains alone or with a single servant. He visited construction sites by moonlight, inspecting progress, demanding changes. He wrote letters to Louis XIV of France, centuries after the Sun King's death, imagining conversations with a monarch who shared his vision of absolute power expressed through architecture. The letters were never sent. They were found among his papers after his death, evidence of a mind untethered from time, lost in fantasy. His avoidance of state business became a crisis. He stopped attending cabinet meetings. He stopped receiving ministers. He communicated through notes delivered by servants. He issued orders for construction, for art commissions, for travel arrangements for his servants to research architectural details in foreign lands. He spent lavishly on projects that had no political purpose. He ignored the complaints. He ignored the debt. He ignored the reality that his personal fortune, generous as it was, could not sustain his ambitions. By 1877, Ludwig's funds no longer covered his commissions. Debt accumulated in the royal cabinet treasury. The treasury was separate from the state's finances, funded by Ludwig's civil list, inherited property income, and secret payments from Otto von Bismarck. Ludwig received about 1 million marks annually for personal expenses. He spent far more. Creditors began to threaten legal action. In 1884, Finance Minister Emil von Riedel arranged a bank loan of 7.5 million marks to avert disaster. The loan was guaranteed by the royal family. Bismarck provided an additional million marks. The debts were temporarily paid off. Ludwig did not stop building. By the summer of 1885, Ludwig had amassed new debts of almost 6.5 million marks. The royal cabinet treasury was insolvent. His ministers advised him to economize. He refused. Instead, he planned further opulent designs. He dreamed of a Byzantine palace, a Chinese pavilion, a Moorish kiosk. He commissioned drawings, hired artisans, ordered materials. He demanded that loans be sought from all of Europe's royalty. He wrote to the Ottoman Sultan, the Tsar of Russia, King Leopold II of Belgium. The letters were desperate, grandiose, delusional. None of the monarchs responded with funds. Ludwig's isolation was complete, politically, financially, personally. His ministers grew alarmed. The debt was approaching the annual income of the royal cabinet treasury. Creditors were preparing lawsuits. If Ludwig lost in court, the royal family's reputation would be destroyed. The monarchy itself could be endangered. The ministers needed a solution. They found it in the law. If Ludwig could be declared mentally incompetent, he could be deposed. His uncle, Prince Luitpold, could be named regent. The debts could be managed. The building projects could be stopped. The monarchy could be saved. All they needed was proof of insanity. Between January and March 1886, a group of ministers and courtiers compiled the Ärztliches Gutachten, the medical report on Ludwig's fitness to rule. The report was assembled by Count Maximilian von Holstein, a courtier who had served Ludwig for years but had grown disillusioned. Holstein used bribery and his high rank to extract complaints from the king's servants. He collected accounts of bizarre behavior, pathological shyness, avoidance of state business, complex and expensive flights of fancy, dining outdoors in cold weather, wearing heavy overcoats in summer, sloppy and childish table manners, violent threats of abuse to servants, dispatching servants on lengthy and expensive voyages to research architectural details. None of it proved insanity, all of it proved eccentricity. The distinction did not matter. The report was compiled without ever examining Ludwig. 4 psychiatrists signed it. The lead psychiatrist was Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, a prominent alienist who specialized in treating the mentally ill. Von Gudden had never met Ludwig. He based his diagnosis on Holstein's accounts and on the assumption that anyone who behaved as Ludwig did must be insane. The diagnosis: paranoia. The conclusion: Ludwig was unfit to rule. The recommendation: deposition and medical supervision. The report was presented to the Bavarian government on June 8, 1886. Prince Luitpold agreed to serve as regent on condition that the report was reliable. He reviewed the evidence. He accepted the conclusion. On June 9, 1886, the Bavarian government declared Ludwig mentally incompetent. Luitpold was named regent. A commission was dispatched to Neuschwanstein to inform Ludwig of his deposition and to take him into custody. The commission arrived on June 10th. Ludwig was in the castle, unaware of what was coming. He had spent the previous days reading, walking in the mountains, avoiding the servants. He was at peace. The peace lasted until the commissioners knocked on the door. Ludwig refused to go. He was enraged, confused, terrified. He ordered the local police to arrest the commissioners. He attempted to rally the townspeople of Hohenschwangau to his defense. Some locals were sympathetic. The gendarmerie hesitated. For a brief moment it seemed Ludwig might resist successfully. Then reality intruded. The commissioners had legal authority. The police had orders from Munich. The townspeople had no power to intervene. Ludwig was isolated, surrounded, out of options. He agreed to leave on condition that he be taken to Castle Berg on Lake Starnberg, where he could be held under medical supervision rather than imprisoned. The commissioners agreed. On June 12th, Ludwig left Neuschwanstein for the last time. Castle Berg was chosen because it was remote, easily secured, and close to Munich. Ludwig was placed under the supervision of Dr. von Gudden, the psychiatrist who had signed the report declaring him insane. Von Gudden's instructions were clear: observe the king, confirm the diagnosis, ensure he did not harm himself or others. Ludwig was not imprisoned in the legal sense. He was confined to the castle and its grounds. He was not allowed visitors. He was not allowed to communicate with the outside world. He was isolated, observed, controlled. Von Gudden believed Ludwig posed no immediate danger. He relaxed security. He allowed Ludwig to walk the grounds. He believed the king would accept his fate peacefully. On the afternoon of June 13th, 1886, Ludwig and von Gudden went for a walk along the shore of Lake Starnberg. It was raining lightly. They left the castle around 6:30 p.m. Von Gudden insisted they go alone, without guards. He wanted to speak with Ludwig privately, to assess his mental state, to establish trust. The two men walked toward the lake. They did not return. By 10 p.m., the castle staff grew concerned. A search was organized. Lanterns were lit. Servants and guards combed the grounds, calling out. At 11:30 p.m., two bodies were found floating face down in shallow water near the shore. Ludwig and von Gudden, both dead. The immediate investigation was brief and inconclusive. Ludwig's coat was found floating nearby. Von Gudden had scratches on his face and signs of a struggle. An autopsy determined that neither man had water in their lungs, suggesting they did not drown in the traditional sense. The official verdict, issued by the Bavarian government within days, was that Ludwig had attempted suicide by drowning, and that von Gudden had died trying to stop him. The verdict was politically convenient. It confirmed the diagnosis of insanity. It exonerated the government. It closed the case. The unofficial theories multiplied immediately. Ludwig was murdered by agents of the government who feared he might rally support and reclaim the throne. Ludwig was escaping, attempting to swim across the lake to freedom, and von Gudden tried to stop him, leading to a struggle in which both drowned. Von Gudden attempted to sedate Ludwig with a syringe. Ludwig resisted. They fought in the water. Both died. Ludwig's heart gave out from the cold water, and von Gudden, trying to save him, also succumbed to hypothermia. None of these theories can be proven. The evidence is circumstantial. The witnesses are dead. The truth, if it ever existed, drowned with them. What is certain is that Ludwig's death was convenient for everyone except Ludwig. The government avoided a constitutional crisis. The royal family avoided bankruptcy. The creditors would be paid from Ludwig's estate. The building projects would stop. The castles would be preserved, not as royal residences, but as state property. Bavaria would manage them, maintain them, eventually open them to the public. The mad king's fantasy would become Bavaria's economic asset. The man who bankrupted himself building dreams would save the kingdom he abandoned. Within weeks of Ludwig's death, the Bavarian government took control of his castles: Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee. All were incomplete. All were expensive. All were liabilities. The question was what to do with them. Demolition was considered. The cost of maintaining the castles would be enormous. But the government hesitated. Ludwig had been popular with the Bavarian people. He was unser König, our king. Destroying his castles would be politically disastrous. The solution was tourism. Open the castles to the public. Charge admission. Let the people see the Mad King's fantasy. Let the castles pay for themselves. Neuschwanstein opened to tourists on August 1, 1886, just 7 weeks after Ludwig's death. The castle was still unfinished. The throne hall had no throne. The kitchen was partially equipped. The bower and square tower were incomplete. None of it mattered. Visitors came in droves. They wanted to see the fairy tale castle, the Mad King's dream. They paid admission. They toured the rooms. They marveled at the decoration, the scale, the absurdity. The castle, which had bankrupted Ludwig, began to generate revenue. The Mad King's revenge was underway. Neuschwanstein opened to tourists on August 1, 1886, just 7 weeks after Ludwig's death. The castle was still unfinished. The throne hall had no throne. The bower and square tower were incomplete. The kitchen was partially equipped. None of it mattered. Visitors came in droves. They wanted to see the fairy tale castle, the Mad King's dream turned nightmare. They paid admission. They toured the rooms. They marveled at the scale, the decoration, the absurdity. The castle, which had bankrupted Ludwig, began to generate revenue. The debt that killed him would be repaid by the crowds who came to gawk at his fantasy. The early years of tourism were modest. In 1886, approximately 18,000 visitors toured the castle. By 1900, the number had grown to 30,000 annually. The Bavarian state, which now owned the castle, invested in infrastructure. Roads were improved, a ticket office was established, guided tours were organized. The castle was marketed as a romantic monument, a symbol of Ludwig's artistic vision. The scandal of his death, the rumors of murder, the financial crisis, all were glossed over. The public wanted a fairy tale. Bavaria gave them one. The transformation of Neuschwanstein from private refuge to public attraction was ironic. Ludwig built the castle to escape the world. He designed it to be isolated, inaccessible, a sanctuary where he could live in his fantasies undisturbed. He spent only 172 days there. After his death, the castle became one of the most visited tourist sites in Europe. By 2025, over 70 million people have toured Neuschwanstein. In peak summer, 6,000 visitors pass through daily. Every 5 minutes, a new group enters. The sanctuary Ludwig craved became a spectacle he would have despised. The revenue generated by Neuschwanstein justified the initial investment posthumously. By the early 20th century, ticket sales covered the maintenance costs. By the mid-20th century, the castle was generating profit. Today, Neuschwanstein attracts approximately 1.5 million visitors annually. Adult admission costs 15 ons. Basic math, 1.5 million visitors, x 15, or 22.5 million Oz in ticket sales alone. Add souvenirs, tours, nearby hotels, restaurants, transport services, and the total economic impact exceeds $90 million annually. Over 139 years since opening, conservative estimates suggest the castle has generated over $4 billion in total revenue and economic stimulus. Ludwig's 6.2 million mark investment has paid for itself many times over, the Mad King's revenge. During World War I, the castle remained open to tourists. Visitor numbers declined, but the site was not damaged. The German government needed the revenue. Tourism, even during wartime, was valuable. The castle became a symbol of German romanticism, a monument to a lost era when kings could build fantasies without political constraint. The narrative was sanitized, nationalistic, useful. Ludwig was portrayed as a tragic hero, not a financially irresponsible recluse. The castle was his legacy, not his ruin. During World War II, Neuschwanstein's role changed dramatically. Its remote location and large interior spaces made it ideal for storage. Between 1940 and 1945, Nazi officials used the castle as a depot for stolen art and artifacts. The Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, the German art looting organization, established headquarters there. Paintings, sculptures, furniture, documents, plundered from occupied territories, Jewish families, museums, private collections, were catalogued, crated, stored in Neuschwanstein's rooms. The castle, built as a medieval fantasy, became a warehouse for Nazi loot. The irony was brutal. Ludwig's dream of medieval chivalry hosted the machinery of modern theft. Allied forces liberated the castle in 1945. American soldiers discovered crates filled with art. Some pieces were returned to rightful owners. Others vanished into the post-war chaos. The castle itself was undamaged. The war passed through without destroying Ludwig's creation. After the war, Neuschwanstein was restored to its pre-war function, tourism. Visitors returned. The castle's role in storing stolen art was acknowledged but not emphasized. The fairy tale was more marketable than the complicity. Bavaria needed the revenue. The past was complicated. The present was pragmatic. In 1955, Walt Disney visited Neuschwanstein. He toured the castle, studied the architecture, took photographs. He was enchanting by the silhouette, the towers, the romantic fantasy made physical. Disney was planning Disneyland, his theme park in Anaheim, California. He needed a centerpiece, a symbol. The castle from Sleeping Beauty, the animated film released in 1959, was directly inspired by Neuschwanstein. The Sleeping Beauty castle at Disneyland, opened in 1955, incorporated Neuschwanstein's towers, turrets, and fairy tale aesthetic. Disney adapted Ludwig's vision for American mass culture. The castle that bankrupted a Bavarian king became the logo of a global entertainment empire. The Disney connection transformed Neuschwanstein's global recognition. Millions of people who had never heard of Ludwig II recognized the castle's silhouette. Disneyland visitors who later traveled to Europe made pilgrimages to Bavaria to see the real Disney castle. The irony compounded. Ludwig built Neuschwanstein inspired by Wagner's operas, medieval legends, and his own fantasies. Disney built his castle inspired by Ludwig's. Tourists visited Neuschwanstein inspired by Disney. The chain of inspiration looped back on itself. The original became famous because of the copy. The Mad King's fantasy became the blueprint for the Magic Kingdom. The economic impact of the Disney connection is difficult to quantify precisely, but visitor surveys consistently show that a significant percentage of international tourists visit Neuschwanstein because of its association with Disney. The castle's fame is global. It appears on postcards, calendars, travel brochures, films, television shows. It is one of the most photographed buildings in the world. The Marienbrücke, a bridge near the castle offering panoramic views, hosts thousands of tourists daily in summer. All of them point cameras at the same angle. All of them capture the same postcard image. The castle has been reduced to an icon, a symbol, a brand. The complexity of Ludwig's tragedy is invisible in the photographs. Maintenance of Neuschwanstein is expensive and continuous. The castle is over 150 years old. Stony roads, mortar crumbles, paint fades, water damage, wind, temperature fluctuations. The footsteps of 1.5 million visitors annually all take a toll. The Bavarian State Department for Palaces, Gardens and Lakes manages the castle. Annual maintenance costs exceed 5 million. Major restoration projects cost tens of millions. Between 2019 and 2025, Bavaria invested over $100 million in restoration work across Ludwig's castles, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee. The work is ongoing. The buildings will never be finished. Preservation is perpetual. In September 2019, Neuschwanstein began a major restoration project to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the castle's foundation stone being laid. The project focused on the exterior stonework, roofs, and structural reinforcements. The work was expected to cost over $20 million and take several years. The castle remained open during restoration, with about 2/3 of the interior accessible to visitors. The restoration revealed the fragility of Ludwig's dream. The castle is beautiful, iconic, globally recognized. It is also a crumbling stone structure requiring constant intervention to prevent collapse. The fantasy is maintained by scaffolding, cranes, and millions of euros. Without them, Neuschwanstein would decay into the ruin Ludwig demolished to build it. In 2023, the Schwangau municipality, where Neuschwanstein is located, held a referendum on applying for UNESCO World Heritage status for Ludwig's castles. The decision was controversial. Some residents feared UNESCO designation would attract even more tourists, overwhelming local infrastructure. Others worried about new building restrictions that could limit development. The vote passed, 56% in favor. Germany submitted the application to UNESCO in early 2024. In mid-2025, UNESCO granted World Heritage status to 4 of Ludwig's castles: Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, and the King's House on Schachen. The designation increased international recognition, boosted tourism by an estimated 22 to 30%, and brought additional maintenance obligations. Bavaria welcomed the prestige. Local residents prepared for more crowds. The economic logic of Neuschwanstein is straightforward. The castle generates more revenue than it costs to maintain. Ticket sales, combined with tourism spending on hotels, restaurants, transport, and souvenirs in the surrounding region, create a net positive economic impact. Estimates suggest Neuschwanstein contributes over $90 million annually to the Bavarian economy. Linderhof and Herrenchiemsee contribute additional tens of millions. Together, Ludwig's castles are a multi-billion euro success story when considering the full scope of direct and indirect economic activity. Bavaria's investment in preservation is justified by return on investment. The castles are not monuments, they are assets. The Mad King's fantasy is a cash machine. The cost of Ludwig's obsession, measured in human terms, is harder to calculate. Ludwig died at age 40, drowned under mysterious circumstances, deposed by his own government, declared insane without examination. His brother Otto, who accompanied him on childhood visits to Hohenschwangau, was declared insane in 1875 and spent the rest of his life confined to a castle, dying in 1916. Ludwig's death may have been suicide, it may have been murder, it may have been an accident. The truth is unknowable. What is known is that his obsession with building destroyed his life, his reputation, his kingdom's finances, and ultimately him. The castles survived. Ludwig did not. The workers who built Neuschwanstein also paid a price. Construction was dangerous. The site was remote, perched on a rocky outcrop, surrounded by gorges. Workers hauled materials up mountain paths, operated cranes, mixed mortar, carved stone, installed structural steel. Accidents were common: falls, crushing injuries, exposure. The records are incomplete, but deaths occurred. The workers' names are not recorded in the castle's official history. They are invisible, erased, forgotten. The castle stands as a monument to Ludwig's vision. It also stands on the labor and sometimes the lives of anonymous men who built it for wages. The fantasy required sacrifice, not Ludwig's, theirs. The castle's survival is a series of accidents and pragmatic decisions. Ludwig died before it was finished. The Bavarian government, facing debt, chose to open it to tourists rather than demolish it. World War I spared it. World War II used it but did not destroy it. Post-war tourism boomed. Disney immortalized it. UNESCO recognized it. Each decision, each accident preserved the castle. Without any single one, Neuschwanstein might be rubble. The castle's existence is contingent, not inevitable. The fantasy survived because it became useful. Utility, not beauty, determined its fate. The narrative around Ludwig has shifted over time. In the immediate aftermath of his death, he was portrayed as a tragic madman, a king who lost touch with reality. By the early 20th century, he became a romantic hero, a misunderstood artist king crushed by Philistine ministers. By the mid-20th century, he was a symbol of German Romanticism, a figure whose castles represented an idealized past. By the late 20th century, scholars began to examine the financial ruin, the obsessive behavior, the possible mental illness. Today, Ludwig is all of these things. Mad king, tragic hero, romantic dreamer, fiscally irresponsible recluse, queer icon, tourist attraction. The narrative is contested, layered, impossible to resolve into a single truth. The castle itself is mute. It does not explain Ludwig. It does not justify his choices. It does not defend his spending. It stands on a hillside, beautiful and impractical, a physical manifestation of one man's refusal to engage with the world. Visitors tour the rooms, admire the murals, photograph the views. They rarely consider the debt, the deposition, the drowning. The castle is a stage set. The tragedy is offstage, invisible, erased by the ticket price and the guided tour. Tourism sanitizes history. The castle is sold as a fairy tale. The truth is darker, more complicated, less marketable. The Mad King's revenge is not metaphorical. Ludwig spent 6.2 million marks building Neuschwanstein. His ministers deposed him partly because of the debt. They declared him insane to stop the spending. They confined him to Castle Berg. Within days, he was dead. The ministers believed they had saved Bavaria from financial ruin. They were wrong. Neuschwanstein, opened to tourists 7 weeks after Ludwig's death, has generated billions in revenue over 139 years. The castle Ludwig could not finish has paid for itself many times over. The spending that destroyed him saved Bavaria. The fantasy that bankrupted the king enriched the state. Ludwig was right. His ministers were short-sighted. The revenge is complete. The broader lesson is ambiguous. Neuschwanstein succeeded economically because it became a tourist attraction, not because Ludwig's vision was validated. The castle works as a spectacle, not as a royal residence. Ludwig's intent was isolation. The outcome was mass tourism. His dream was privacy. The reality is 6,000 visitors per day. His goal was to escape modernity. The result is selfie sticks and souvenir shops. The castle survived by betraying everything Ludwig intended. Success required failure. The fantasy endures by being commodified, packaged, sold. The Mad King's revenge is also the Mad King's defeat. Today, Neuschwanstein is one of the most visited castles in Europe. Over 70 million people have toured it since 1886. In 2025 alone, approximately 1.5 million visitors will pass through. The castle is featured in films, advertisements, travel brochures. It is the logo for Bavaria, a symbol of Germany, an icon of European Romanticism. Disneyland's Sleeping Beauty Castle, directly inspired by Neuschwanstein, is one of the most recognizable buildings in the world. The chain of influence runs from Wagner's operas to Ludwig's castle to Disney's theme park to global mass culture. The fantasy Ludwig built for himself became the blueprint for fantasies consumed by billions. The cost of maintaining this fantasy is hidden from visitors. The scaffolding, the restoration crews, the structural engineers, the millions of euros spent annually to prevent collapse. The castle is not eternal. It is fragile, aging, requiring constant intervention. Without maintenance, Neuschwanstein would decay within decades. The stone would crumble, the roofs would leak, the murals would fade, the structure would become unsafe. The fairy tale requires money, labor, expertise. The fantasy is not free. It never was. Ludwig spent 6.2 million marks. Bavaria spends millions more annually in perpetuity. The dream survives because it is subsidized. The market sustains it. Tourism pays the bills. Without visitors, Neuschwanstein would be abandoned. The fantasy would end. The castle's future is uncertain. Climate change accelerates weathering. Tourism increases wear. Maintenance costs rise. At some point, the cost may exceed the revenue. At some point, the structure may be too fragile to support daily tours. At some point, Bavaria may decide the expense is not justified. That point has not arrived. For now, the castle is profitable, famous, iconic. For now, the Mad King's revenge continues. For now, Ludwig's fantasy endures, sold to tourists at $15 per head, photographed 1 million times, reduced to a postcard, a logo, a brand. The tragedy is invisible. The castle is beautiful. The bills are paid. The dream survives. For now.